This is the Page Publishing Book Club. Good evening. I'm your host, Alice Stockton Rossini, along with my engineer, Rob Barrett. How you doing, Robbie? Thanks for stopping by. We have a jam-packed show tonight, so let's get to it. Theodore Josiah Haig has visited with us before. He's a former superintendent of schools in East Orange, New Jersey, now an international educational consultant, and he writes fictional suspense novels that capture the spirit of wherever his travels take him. This is his fifth novel with Page Publishing. Welcome back, Theodore. Now, last time we talked about New York's finest, the Bronx View, right? And tonight we're talking about Mindanao.
Okay, well, there's two pieces I want to stress. First, the story takes place in the United States in the Mindanao region in the Philippines, where the Japanese were occupiers during World War II and used the region to bury diamonds, gems, and gold that they looted and pillaged as invaders to finance their war effort. It was the United States military who patrolled the Pacific Ocean, preventing the Japanese ships from reaching Japan, forcing them to find alternate ways to harbor their spoils. So they buried them in the Philippines. This is a story about conspiring over the recovery of those spoils among the scavengers, Islamic separatist groups, and 7 U.S. Army veterans. And then the second part I'd like to share is all of my suspense novels feature an investigative reporter. In Mindanao, it is Roland Cavalier, an award-winning journalist, who are covering the story of the signing of the accord between one of the splinter Islamic separatist groups and the Philippine government in Manila. He had to also investigate this conspiracy. Very exciting, I think. It's a very interesting story. Most of it takes place in the Philippines, though.
Any particular reason why you chose the Philippines?
Well, I've been there. I've been to the Philippines twice, and I used to live for 11 years in the Middle East, and people probably don't realize it, but there's a large expat contingency from the Philippines that lives in Qatar, which is where I lived. And the people were very, very friendly. I've become a fan of their culture, and I was inspired by my travels, and that's how the story came about. The moral of the story, quite frankly, is that when you take something that doesn't belong to you, oftentimes you pay for it.
We could only hope, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So there is justice.
Yes, ma'am.
How do you do this?
When you're passionate about something and you get good at it over a period of time, it becomes easier. It's just like anything else in life. You know, at one point in time, I wasn't a writer. I mean, my background was mathematics and running complex organizations. But then I realized I had this passion for traveling, and I started writing about it, and then I had passion for storytelling. And then you put all those things together, and, you know, over a period of time, you get good at it, and then you find out that you're kind of better than the people that are around you at that, you know, not at everything, but at that. And then, you know, it just takes off, and that's what happened with me. And believe it or not, writing to me is the easiest thing I've ever done in my life. Challenging, but easy for me.
When you go to these places, do the stories just kind of filter in through your surroundings?
Right. Like last year, after the earthquake in Kathmandu, Nepal, it happened in April, and I was there in June. And then later in the year, I was in Indonesia. And getting to know the people and the culture kind of inspires you. You know, and I get up every morning and write, and these stories just come about. Mark Twain is one of my most powerful influences. He has a powerful quote. You know, you create 2 or 3 people, and you turn them loose in your manuscript. Something is bound to happen, and there's nothing you can do about it. And then you spend the rest of the book trying to recover those natural consequences of those occurrences. And before you know it, your novel is already finished, and you have not even contributed an idea. It's just a powerful concept, and people who write understand exactly what that's all about. Matter of fact, I wish everybody could experience that, because it's something I never imagined I would be doing until around 12 years ago.
Yeah, you know what? I wish that for every single author listening, Theodore, to be able to feel the way you do about writing. Thanks so much. I.L. Brown, or Larry Brown, has written a generational story. It's called The Earls of Alabama. It takes place in the early 1930s in rural Alabama. And why don't you take it from there, Larry?
The sheriff has been murdered by some unknown assailants, and his name was James Earl, and he was the third sheriff in succession from the Earl family. So it'll be the first time in about 60 years one of the Earls has not been in charge of the sheriff's department, law and order in this county. And this man, James Earl, had only one son, and he's a teenager, so he wasn't ready to be the fourth in a row. And after his funeral, the teenage boy is told his family's history by an old mulatto black man, Ben Davis. He had been born into slavery, and he had been involved with the family since he was 6 years old. And we take the book back to 1866, and then we tell the story of the Earl family through 5 generations. And at the end of the book, we solve the murder of his father.
Nice. That's a nice, neat little package you got there.
I got the story in my head, and I just couldn't get it out. I've always liked stories. I've liked to read. I like movies. I grew up hearing people tell a lot of stories, and in the South, people who like to talk like to embellish stories when they tell them, and I was just always intrigued by it. And when I retired and my golf game slowed down, I got this story in my head, and I said, I'm going to try to write it. And so I started writing it, and it became much more than what I had in my head. It just grew and grew as I wrote and wrote, and it was fun. I could sit and write, and literally I could see these people in my head as if I were watching a movie on television. I could see them. I could hear them. I knew what they sounded like. I knew what they looked like, and it was fascinating.
Does this book end, or does it keep going?
I have a sequel. I've just finished it.
You know, the big question is, are you doing anything on your own to promote it?
I went to the local Barnes and Nobles on Hilton Head Island, and they took the book and they put me on the local authors table next to Pat Conroy. So that was great.
That is great. So Pat Conroy lives in Hilton Head?
He lives in Beaufort. Yeah, so Beaufort, Bluffton, Hilton Head, we're all really very close together.
That's nice to hear. They have a special table just for local authors.
So I think the cover is very distinctive, and so we've gotten a lot of comment about it.
All right, what's the cover look like?
It's a picture of an old black man. He's got his shoulders up. He's got gray hair, and that represents the Ben Davis, who's really the narrator of the story. And behind him is a Ku Klux Klansman.
Ooh.
So it's a pretty distinctive cover. So
yeah, dramatic to say the least.
It was probably one of the most enjoyable things I've ever done, and I think I'll probably right now, as long as I'm alive, I'll keep writing.
Nice to hear, Larry. Keep those books coming. Douglas Olson wrote the human comedy After the Apocalypse, The New Way. Now, Douglas, I think it's interesting. Human comedy and apocalypse are in the same title.
Well, I will explain that to you. You know, I read Dan Brown's The Inferno, so this is sort of written as a sequel, an unauthorized sequel. So his book was The Inferno, and this book has Purgatory and Paradise. And Purgatory is before and during the apocalypse, and Paradise is after the apocalypse. I am retired. I worked for all my career water resources management in developing countries, trying to make a difference, trying to help developing countries to improve their water resource management. And I think I was a little bit successful in doing that. But I came to the conclusion that water resource management was getting worse all over the world, not better. And so that even though I made a little difference in some local spots, the overall situation was worse. And I came to the conclusion that basically everything else is not being dealt with either. Climate change, loss of biodiversity, overfishing of oceans, even things like the superbug that's antibiotic resistant. All of these things are just kind of heading towards the eventual collapse of human civilization. And so I said, well, I'm not able to do much to save the world by working my whole career. Maybe I can write a book on how to do it right the next time after the apocalypse. So how the human race can live sustainably on this planet in the future after the apocalypse. And so the basic idea of the new way is humans have to live as hunter-gatherers, because it's the only way that we can naturally live sustainably within nature on this planet. When we try to, manipulate nature or change things or all of the stuff that we try to do, in the end, it's going to end in disaster. So going back to Dan Brown and The Inferno, he had a character in his book called Bernard Sobrist. And his idea was to reduce the problem of overpopulation by introducing a virus into the human population that would reduce human fertility by 30%. And so at the end of the Inferno, all of these people go to Geneva to try to deal with Dr. Zobrist's attempt to affect human fertility. So my book starts out in Geneva when they're talking about those issues, and come to the conclusion that Dr. Zobrist's solution isn't going to work. And the reason it isn't going to work is because human population is determined by how many babies people want to have, not by fertility. They came to the conclusion it wasn't going to work. And they also came to the conclusion that nothing else was going to work, similar to me in my career. And so they came up with this plan, this new way how to do it right the next time after the apocalypse. And so then the next part of the book is called Paradise. And Paradise is basically going back to the Garden of Eden, living as hunter-gatherers in harmony with nature, but also trying to preserve human knowledge, because human knowledge is the one thing that we have that is special about human beings. So the idea was to try to preserve human knowledge, but to try to keep people living as hunter-gatherers and not trying to use the knowledge to improve their situation.
But human being humans, something's got to get screwed up, right?
Yeah, so it doesn't work. You got it. It turns out that humans being humans, that they will not use the knowledge. They will use the knowledge, and they will try to manipulate and change things. And then so in the end, the new way doesn't work either. You can't impose a way of living sustainably because human beings are human beings.
But through this book, will we realize what we're doing?
I think maybe so. I tried to save the world, but I'm afraid I wasn't able to do it. Not working my career and not writing my book.
Well, food for thought. You never know.
But at the end of the book, I do introduce something that is, I think, good for us. And that's, we can all try to do our bit and try to make a difference and try to save the world. But what we really need to do is to look inside ourselves and find peace inside ourselves. Is the best thing we can do.
I get this. So if we can't save the planet, save ourselves. Douglas, thanks so much. Callum Heder has an interesting tale about a cat. It's called Never Take Your Cat to the Circus, Callum.
A girl buys a ticket to the circus for her cat, but the cat gets into the circus in spite of signs that say no pets. In spite of that, the rules are that there are no pets in the circus. Well, they call her down from her seat and make her part of the show. And in the course of doing that, they include the cat in a magic trick. And what happens is it's a good way to usher the cat, in essence, out of the show. The way it came about was one night I was listening to some interviews on NPR talking about Mark Twain and whether or not he could write his own autobiography. And it occurred to me that Mark Twain may have simply written in the voices of the people that he knew best. That was my inspiration, because I felt if I could write a book in someone else's voice, in the voice of someone else who I could choose that I knew well, that even I could write a book. So that was sort of my inspiration, that realization that writing in your own voice isn't always the way to write a book.
So you wrote in the voice of this person who got their cat into the circus.
Right. I had two girls. We had a little black cat. When I was growing up in Wisconsin, they had a little circus that came to town, and somehow all these elements got mixed together and became the book. We got the black cat to be a companion to a calico cat that we had, but they just didn't get along. We always felt a little bit sorry for the black cat.
How old are your daughters?
19 and 25 right now. The voice that I imagined to write the book in would have been, their voices when they were much younger.
Yeah, I'm sure. Did they read the book?
Oh yes, they liked it. Even my niece and my nephew read the book. And my brother didn't tell my niece that I had written it, and got a good review out of her.
That's the best review you could ask for, right?
Right. I also had a neighbor of mine bring it to her kindergarten class, and one of the kids really got the concept of it, but he felt it should take place closer to home. So the comment he had on it was, I think the next book you write should be Never Take Your Cat to Walmart.
I like that.
I tried very hard to to keep away from convenient categories and moralization, because there's plenty of that in the world right now. I've tried to set it up so that it's like a coin standing on edge, that you have to decide for yourself exactly how you would have handled the same incident or circumstance. And so that way you get to play a variety of roles. You know, if you were the ringmaster, how would you have handled it? There's one particular person who's a magician that has a lot to do with, of course, the magic trick that ushers the cat out of the circus. But would you have handled it that way? I think there's plenty of people forcing ideas into categories. And in reality, people need the experience of having time to wonder whether things belong in categories or not.
I like that, Callum, making kids think. And I think we need to take a quick break. Coming up, some vampires, some demons, and one woman very lucky to be alive. Don't go anywhere.
Have you written a book and want to get it published? Then now's the time to call Page Publishing at 800-204-6099 and do it immediately. You see, they're looking for authors of all types of books. And unlike most publishers, Page Publishing will take the time to review most of the books submitted to them. And they'll even give you their feedback. And if they like what they read, Page Publishing will get your book into bookstores and for sale online at Amazon, the Apple iTunes Store, and other outlets. They'll handle everything: copyright protection, printing, cover art, publicity, and editing. So if you've written a novel, a children's book, a cookbook, inspirational work, a book of poetry, or biography, and want to get it published, then you need to call Page Publishing and do it immediately. Call 800-204-6099 now for your free author submission kit. Your road to fame and fortune could very well start with this simple phone call. For your free author submission kit, call Page Publishing at 800-204-6099.
Thanks for coming back to the Page Publishing Book Club. Felicia Stevenson wrote a book entitled A Daily Relationship with God, a story that began a few years back when she had a life-changing and life-saving experience. Felicia.
I got off of work. I was working third shift, and my husband worked day shift, so he was at work. I got off work. I went to sleep, and we had a little heater plugged in the bathroom, and the bathroom was right next to my bedroom. They think the heater caught on fire, but my entire house burned down. And the bed I was laying in never caught on fire. I never got burned, only carbon monoxide. People say they never heard of this, but that's what I was told by the doctor in Baltimore, that over 98% of my body had carbon monoxide poison in it. So I was put in some sort of tank a couple of times to get carbon monoxide out of my body. It changed the way I talk, because my voice never sounded like this before. Like a decompressor they put me in. Well, I stayed in the hospital for 28 days, but I woke up 2 weeks later not knowing what had happened.
Well, you said they pronounced you dead?
Yes, and they airlifted me to Baltimore Shock Trauma, where they told my family if I made it through the night, I would be brain dead. When I woke up, I couldn't talk. I had a trach in my neck, and I didn't know that if the trach was covered, that I could talk. So this lady kept coming in. She was like a speech therapist, I guess, because they had to train me to eat again. I remember that. And I remember her saying, Alicia, just talk. And I kept trying to say something, but no words would come out. So she was pressing on my vocal cords. And when I first talked, I sounded really, it was almost like I sounded like a cartoon character. And I cried a little bit, and then I thought, but I'm alive. And just every day, I got a little better and a little better. So after 28 days, they let me come home. I'm here today, and I just thank God, because I never got burned. I got a burn on the back of my arm that you could barely see, and one on my thigh.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yes. I started going to church, and I didn't realize how lucky I was. The more I went to church and told my story, the more people wanted to hear it. And I just started reading the Bible, and I started thanking God. And I would write down little things, and then I think I bought a daily inspirational book. And that book helped me to know more. And as I was writing, something just said, keep writing. And it just turned into a daily inspirational book. It's amazing.
It is amazing, Felicia. Amazing you're alive. And now for our supernatural segment. Augustus Van Logan wrote The Lattice, Wicked Paradise, a story about the first vampire. Augustus.
The way I explain it is the first vampire is also the first king of the world, and it would also be the archangel Lucifer. Basically, it tells of how the first king of the world would also be the last king of the world, which would be, basically the Antichrist. It talks about what are 7 wonders of the world, and him being the 8th wonder of the world. Because, Lucifer was a right-hand man next to God, and his only sin was pride, because he wanted to be like God. How it is explained in the book is, God basically gives him the earth, and cast him out of heaven, and he kind of makes his own kingdom on earth.
Isn't that what's happened? I kind of feel like that's happened already sometimes.
Yeah, this is like, it starts at the beginning where you've heard of Nimrod, of course, right?
Yeah.
It really don't speak too much in the Bible about Nimrod, but it does say that he was a mighty hunter and that he set up the first kingdom on earth, which was, Babylon. So that was basically Lucifer, in human form. The inspiration of it was for the vampirism, like a eternal damnation. But the vampires have supernatural powers, they feed on the blood, and it's basically the eroticism of the cult of like Dionysus, And in my book, I refer to Lucifer as Dionysus, Nimrod, a lot of these Greek gods in mythology or different mythologies of the world refer to him by different names. Basically the same characteristics of it. There's a lot of numerology in the book, and a lot of poetic meaning to his name. His true name in my book as the first vampire is Ageless Shahar. And the book kind of explains the numerology and the significance of the name and all that. So.
Is this the start of a series?
Yeah, I hope so. I certainly hope so. It's basically just to lay the groundwork of get people familiar with the characteristics of the characters of the vampirism. Of course, everybody should know about vampires, but
they're pretty popular, vampires.
They are. They are, and in a way, Jesus was compared to vampires when he had said, eat my body and drink my blood to have eternal life. So in a way, this is like Lucifer's his counterparts to Christ.
You're going to get some critics coming down on you, I have a feeling.
Oh yeah, I'm sure, but that's good. It's good. If people aren't talking about you, you're not doing something right.
All right, Charles, whether it's good or bad, right?
Whether it's good or bad, but I think I really just want people to think, outside the box.
Okay, well, speaking of vampires and the supernatural, Melvina Hawkins Patterson loves sci-fi, and she can thank her mom for that. Her book is entitled Demons Rising, Return of the Damned.
It's a science fiction thriller based on my first novel, Children of Eden, which was released in September of 2007. And it's about when Lucifer defied God and was cast out of the kingdom of heaven. 1/3 of the angels have followed, and brimstone and fire clip their wings as they tumble into a black pit. The main characters of the story are Father Time and ordained priest Oblivion, a homeless man. 2 men living in 2 different worlds in force of defeating evil. They would form a super coalition called the Magnificent. And this team was a team of misfits in hopes of protecting the world from total damnation. Nowhere is safe anymore, and a man must find a safe haven to keep from coming in contact with the infected, the undead that has risen and contaminated by Pharisee 22, which is mentioned also in my first book, Children of Eden. And so I was able to write some type of sequel stemming from that first novel to, come up with some new characters. This is sci-fi, science fiction horror. I'm somewhat a little bit like Anne Rice, a little bit like Stephen King. I like science fiction. I've always loved science fiction. Let me tell you why it's so dark. I have always loved science fiction, even at the age of 15. My mother had inspired me to write fiction because I remember back in the early 70s when she taught acting lessons to a group of geriatrics. George Romero, I know you've heard of him. George Romero, which he's the director of Night of the Living Dead. One of his associates or representatives came to visit the university, and he used her entire class back in that time to participate in his hit classic Night of the Living Dead.
How lucky was
So
she?
Our whole class. There were elderly people. And she was a part of that, what started the era of the zombie apocalypse. So she inspired me at that time to write fiction, and I had a love for it ever since then. I never lost it.
Did you have a good experience with Page Publishing?
Oh, yes. I do love Page Publishing. Yes, Page Publishing to me is a very good company. To me, they are professional. And this book really, it didn't take that long for them to actually finish my novel as far as putting it together and everything. I would say within maybe about 5 months. It didn't take that long. I'm also interested in having some kind of book signing at the DragonCon event. It's an event that is held once a year here in Georgia. And people dress up, as Star Wars, characters and things of the sort.
Sounds like Comic-Con.
Yes, it is. And if you write fiction, science fiction, or any kind of horror thriller or anything like that, it is geared towards that. So I'm interested in holding some kind of book signing event at DragonCon.
All right, sounds like a plan, Malvina. Good luck. And DragonCon fans, make sure you look her up. And look at the clock, Rob. I think we got to get out of here. Thank you so much for keeping us company tonight. We always appreciate it when you stop by. Just remember, you can also download our podcasts on 710 WOR. I hope we've been able to give you a little hope, a little insight, a little inspiration so you can get started on your book. We will be back next week for another edition of the Page Publishing Book Club. Same time, same place. 710 WOR. Have a great weekend.